This is going to be your review video for Melodic Dictation 5-4 and 5-6. I didn't want to mark up my book, so I can do it, work in it again later, or not have to erase it, so I just wrote them up by hand, but they're set up exactly the same. And for number 4, it's got the Beethoven contextual, really cool sounding one. Which is important to hear so you can see how the simple melodies can fit into dynamic textures. And this is what we're transcribing. Okay, and what the first thing we want to recognize is that the two phrases are identical, just one is up the octave. So the first one's bum 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 bum. They're identical, literally. Beethoven hasn't written a period; he's written repeated phrase. Okay. The other thing is, since it's identical, not just the notes but the rhythms, which means that this here is going to get picked up at the end of here, halfway point, to start our next one there. So we can just start with these notes are going to be repeated up an octave, right? So we know that this measure is going to look like this. Bum, bum, bum. And rather than parallel fill them in, we'll just do this and then we'll copy it up an octave, right? So we listen to it and we go, what nice rhythms you have. Okay? And you know, I would listen to this a bunch of times. Dun 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 dun. And since you're using this as a reference or review of your own things, I'll just pretend that you've done that. So it's dun 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 dun. Now there's a little bit of going back and forth, but it's mostly up and then mostly down, right? Dun 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 dun. Sounds the same as here. And then it kicks up the octave. So I think that's the same note. It's important that you don't just go linearly. Linearly is good because, you know, it helps you progress. But we globally get the idea of what this is here before we look at pitches. So we can say, oh, that's an easy note to there, right? And then we look for other things. Dun, 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 dun. This note here is a long note, right? So it's easy to hear and remember. Dun, dun. Feels like so. I can also go, where's do? Do, so, bum, 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 right? Feels like so, because I'm in A minor, right? It's a minor key, no sharps and flats. Everything in this chapter, if it's minor, is A minor. Da 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 da. Sounds like a scale up. Sounds like a scale up. Bum 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 bum. So now, if you can't guess that this is bum 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 bum, so do, A minor, you could go you could go backwards and say if we're stepping into this, you could go backwards like that, right? So you could be like dun 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 dun, right, like that, right? Now this is going down, but there's a funny little turnaround here. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. It's Carol of the Bells. Yun da da dun dun da da dun. Right? But it goes down, gets to here, and then hiccups and goes back. You may have to listen to that a bunch of times. I don't know. Scales up. Bum bum. Sounds like an arpeggio. Sounds like a scale, sounds like an arpeggio. Well, you can track this either way, but bum bum bum. Sing it backwards. Bum 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 bum. Feels like so do me. And you know, the more music experience you have, the better you'll be. I wrote a song, the backwards alphabet song. Da 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 na 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 na. Right? Z, Y, X, and W, V. So I have this in my head. But remember, skips in the same direction generally form a chord. And this is our A minor chord that we're hearing right there outlined. Bum, bum, bum. Same note going back down the scale. Bum, bum, bum. And here's where you do some listening. Da 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 da. I think there's really only one, really maybe one and a half super tricky things. This note there, because if you don't recognize that two skips in a row usually make a triad, and A minor is the triad we're outlining here, May, Do, So, being aware of this being May and skipping down will help you know it's one chord as opposed to something else, as opposed to Re, Ti, So, May, Do, So, right? That's a tricky spot right there, but if you get everything else right, you know, that's like half a point out because of pitch. Also, maybe you just guessed this wrong and you're stuck going forward in your mind. Bum, 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 and you want like bum, 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 or something like that. You want to get this anchor point up here because it's the high note, it's the long note, it's the easy note to remember, and you can measure it against your do. Okay? And then you can go from there. And if you got this one out, maybe you end up going linearly, one note at a time this way, and then all of it's out. So, big takeaway from here, you know, listen to it, sing it, but get your rhythm and then get your anchor notes that are easy to hear and measure. Now this thing is just the same, and so you'd go bum 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 bum, right? Da. It's identical. Da, na, na, da. And with music that you transcribe or write on your own that has a pickup, when you finish your section, you usually subtract your pickup from the end of this measure here. So we're not going to fill this in like a half note because it's not. And we would even put a rest there because it's taken up right there. That's pickup notation technology. At the end of the section or the end of the piece, you'll subtract this from what you write there. Okay? All right. The next one can be a little daunting, but and sort of weird if you don't listen to it in context. So let me play the contextual one first. It's so beautiful, and then when you hear just the simple melody pulled out of that, it can seem a little disjointed. But here's the beautiful full orchestrated version of this. Okay, straight out of, well, John Williams stole that, right? For every movie that he ever wrote when he wanted something beautiful. Anyhow, here we go. It's much plainer sounding, but it's useful for us to transcribe. Okay, so again, this presumes you've listened to this a lot. I'm going to point out some things that you can do when you have these long, slow melodies and you're going like, well, how many beats was that? Listen to the intent or the gesture. It's bum, 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 bum. yana, long note like that, right? These are scales up, and then there's a big step down kind of thing after a big leap right there. And then it does it again, dee-da, which means that since this was in the pickup, 4-1, it's going to be 4-1 again, unless you're the trickiest of composers. And there are a couple out there that we'll look at, but mostly this is a good rule. This felt like this is 4-1, and same thing happens again, so it's going to be 4-1 again, right? It's like it's going to be some kind of long note like that, and then dee-dum. And then the next pickup, although it's not the same figure, has the same kind of like long and then pick up into the next thing. So I think the biggest problem here is getting the rhythm and then dealing with the big intervals. And sometimes students focus so much on the fact that there's these big intervals that they don't get the rhythm, but the process is the same. We got the rhythm for this one, it allowed us to measure and place things, right? We need the rhythm or shape for this. Your tip for the day is that since this is a pickup into there and a long note, and the sound's the same, it's going to be under the pickup into the next measure and a long note. So that's 3 beats, and that's 3 beats. Bum, 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 bum. Kind of sketching the contour out. Since this has got a pickup here, this will just be 3 beats at the end, and that's it right there. Okay? All right. I'm going to listen to it one more time, and then we'll just sort of dig into it. So, if you can pick these intervals out of thin air, you do much better. So interval practice is good to have. And when you start to, like in the first one here, I said this top note was long, and so it should be easy to measure, but it is after a scale, and it's compact there. This note is long, but it's after a big leap here, right? And so that could be it could be difficult for you to retain a sense of key. I'm going to get this part first, and then I'm going to show you how to get this right here, okay? So it goes bum, bum, so I'm in the key of C, it sounds major, so do, so it's definitely do, re, mi. That's all I need right there, okay? Because what I want to do is I want to keep do in my ears, so I can go like yada, right? Now if you can't connect these two, sing this in your high voice and then bring it down an octave by singing it in your chest voice. Bum 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 bum, ba-da, ba-da, ba-dum, 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 bum 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 bum, ba-dum, and you'll discover that it's the same note. Ba-dum, ba-dum. Or you could go mi, re, and you could hear this do. Or you could have picked off that this is an octave, but actually I find that for myself to be pretty difficult. I find it easier to hear the function, or just to take this and transfer it down an octave in my voice, and then I recognize it as the same note right there, okay? Or I hear this and go, re, and it feels like it's not settled where it wants to go, bum, bum, which is do, which tells me that's re, okay? So peg the interval, hear the solfege function, right? Or bring this down an octave and compare it to what you have there. Well, what happened is, it's just that. Mi, re, and the reason it's so difficult and kind of beautiful is that when you separate these notes, like you make big gaps in your melody, it becomes really hard to hear the melodic line in connectivity. In the 20th century, composers started to do that. They started to break their lines apart with these big gaps so that they wouldn't be smooth and tuneful, but they'd be disjunct with big leaps and things like that. And since then, we've done some studies to see, like, is it just that we're not used to those melodies, that they don't sound melodic, or is there something intrinsic about that? They wanted to see if, why people don't get behind this music that was written then as easily. And they can take, like, well-known songs like the Star Spangled Banner or Happy Birthday or Row Row Your Boat or anything pretty much. And if they start to take the contour of it and then throw a note high, an octave, and then come back and throw a note low, an octave and stuff, pretty soon people that are, of course, very familiar with those songs can't even recognize those songs in them. So this jump thing of an octave here or any big interval out of the range that you're in to begin with will, make it difficult for you to hear. All right, we know this repeats twice, so we'll do that right there. Okay. Ba-na-na-nina. So I double checked last time I listened, and this sounds like the same note to me, right? But we'll double check it one more time, and all we're doing is we're going to listen to see if these are the same, and then maybe we'll get these notes, or maybe we'll just hear this and measure where we're at. Okay. Do, re, mi, re. I'm checking it by singing it in the same octave. Mi, re. It is re. Da, da. Sounds like me or do re mi. That's what that sounds like. Dun dun. Scales into mi re. All right. Now at this point, if you flub these guys right here, I'm hearing this mi or mi do re da na I'm here. It's the same. I can hear do right there. Scales up. So I got all that right. If you flub these two notes here, you know they're quarter notes, but still, that's only a half a point per pitch being wrong. They sound like they're right beside each other. Ba-dum, right? Ba-dum, bum, ba-da. Right? So whatever notes you pick up here, they'll be a step beside each other, right? I think I'm going to use the same trick. Ba-dum, I think. Ba-dum, bum, ba-na-na-na, ba. Or you can get the interval there. Da-na-da-na, ba-na, 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 da-ya. And if I sing that enough times, I can hear that that's a fifth. Now, this 4 means measure 4. I can hear it's a fifth right there. And then that would be la. This is a non-chord tone. We're meant to land on so, which makes sense because so, like la, so, do, re, mi, outlining that kind of either one triad, so, do, mi, or we've landed on the 5 and then we're going to the 1 at the end there, something like that. Once I have this, I can sing it down the octave. I can listen to so, do, re, mi, fa, so, la, so, do, re, mi, and you can hear it from the perspective of like solfege in the key, right? Or yada, bum bum. Capture those two intervals. Da 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 da. Wherever you want to measure from, right? That you feel comfortable with. Da da da. Or da da dum. Da da. So it's a third to there and a fifth to there. You can just hear that that's a G and it confirms for you. I'm spending a lot of time there because I want you to understand that, maybe one of those methods isn't going to work for you. But, and even if you are in the process of sort of guessing educated wise, that's still the right process because as your skills get better, your guesses get more accurate, but the process that you're thinking about, triangulation of, comparing that note against things, against the key, against a given note, against do, which is sort of like always a given note in your ears, should be good. And of course, raw intervals are our last sort of check. So, all right. You'll get to report probably on how you did or if this helped you at all. And I'm going to close that up now and do another video on the harmonic dictations.